Are we at a place right now where information and data that we have that typically has been used to buy digital media more efficiently, specifically online video, is now actionable or able to be used against linear television or VOD, right? I think that's an important differentiator because I think VOD is the point of entry. That's going to be the first inventory that's going to come sort of online for dynamic ad insertion. The inventory is a bit more controlled. It's not sort of beholden to a live linear broadcast. So the things like the 2-week, staging for serving and things, you're not encumbered by a lot of the same challenges of live linear, right? I think we're there and it's happening. And there are businesses that are emerging like Simul Media, Audience Express, in different parts of the inventory bucket, specifically local as the first most opportunistic, have found buckets of liquidity and said, okay, we're going to use data and marry third-party data sets and actually come up with some proxy for better addressability, which is more efficient, right? And that's a real key differentiator because when you talk about television, most of the data research says that television is not necessarily will deliver greater ROI if you deliver more addressable or targeted TV. It's actually about eliminating waste, which sounds a little bit like semantics, but it lends itself sort of as a great point of entry that if you just have a bit of data to make more informed decisions, you will make more higher ROI based decisions, right? So that being said, I think that the biggest challenge in television is the threading of the needle between the planning and the buying and then the actual trafficking, right? The infrastructure is still sort of very far behind. There is finite inventory. You have the same business challenges from the perspective of, or in comparison to online video where there's a lack of liquidity. But the reality is that the infrastructure of legacy television is such that even if we have this wealth of data, we're still beholden and encumbered by the sort of kludgy ad serving infrastructure that is proprietary with every operator in the US. And there's really no huge incentive to change, right? Even though the upfronts were down this year in cable, broadcast was up, and consistently we're seeing it up in dollars every year, maybe not necessarily in volume, right? But the reality is that at the end of the day, there has to be an incentive to make this inventory actionable in regards to the data in real time, and it's just not present in the marketplace yet.
What about the new signals, new data points, new information that allows TV planning or digital planning to be more effective, like ACR, visual recognition? There's a bunch of things happening. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think they're incredibly valuable. I mean, I'm building a new company actually based on the opportunities that they afford, right? But the reality is that we still have a small install base, right? We still have a nascent ecosystem where everybody is kind of jockeying for position, right? And I think it's interesting, right? The way that I liken it is, so let's just take OEMs in particular, which is where ACR is valuable, right? It's the ability to recognize linear content using the internet-based or smart TV environments on smart televisions. So if you look at just OEM and manufacturers, CE manufacturers, they've gone from being a hardware business, which is bill of materials driven, to being in the software business when they launched their app environments and smart TV environments, and now they're in the data business. And we're going to see it be a long time before those business models mature. And until we get to that point, a lot of the things that we have within a digital ecosystem that afford us the opportunity to sort of make that data actionable and meaningful, like third-party auditing, format standardization, things like that, we're a bit away from that, right? So the data is interesting. It will be meaningful. The volumes are still very low and the install base is very low, and we need to get the connect rates up. And in order to do that, we need to provide an incentive for individuals to connect their smart TVs to the internet, right? If we look at over the top in particular, ACR is valuable there, but we're still using an on-demand construct for ad serving because most of the over-the-top platforms are app-based, right? I personally believe that with a consolidation with the operators in the US in particular, and we're sort of headed towards a duopoly where Comcast, Time Warner, and AT&T Direct will have 60% market share, I believe that will result in the retention of the digital rights as more and more of a priority for the major broadcasters and cable providers, and that will result in eventually a long tail of us seeing more pure play linear format distribution over IP platforms. And as that changes, that data will become even more valuable. But until then, we're still using the constructs of the web to serve ads around premium television content over the internet.
And actually, finally, we're heading out to New Mexico in a few weeks. It's exciting.
Yeah,
so what do you think some of the, I mean, it's a massive, but in terms of what we cover, our audience, what'll be some of the big themes that we should be watching out for there?
Well, I think one of the things we should be looking at is what's happening with the business models and the economics of over-the-top and premium video in Europe. I think it's sort of interesting, right? Because they've had kind of a business model of commissions and and things like that around the programmatic ecosystem. We've seen sort of take hold, especially with some of the European headquartered holding companies in the U.S. I think that some of the success that Sky, for example, has had with their over-the-top platforms and their premium, pure play kind of digital video products is very much so a bellwether for us of the directional opportunities that we have as an industry. So I think we're going to see some leadership. I think we're going to still continue to see and have the affirmation that Europe is not a country. I'm really curious to see what fraud is going to be as how relevant is in the conversation, because the word on the street is a lot of the fraud that we're having is coming out of sort of Eastern Europe, some of the issues we have with non-human traffic and bots, and I'm curious to see whether or not Europe has kind of had the awakening and the wake-up call that we have in the US marketplace. But I think at the end of the day, what happens is when we specifically as thought leaders in the US extract ourselves from this market in New York or the West Coast or wherever, and we go to Europe, it's sort of a very different energy. I mean, the conference itself, Christian and his team do a great job of organizing it. It's, ganz Deutsch, and that it's efficient, things like water and, and commuting there and the mass transit aren't an issue. And I think it really affords an opportunity to have much more productive, meaningful meetings, dialogue, and sessions in particular when we're actually at the show. And I'm excited for it.